understand that inspiration isn't like it's not a waterfall. Inspiration is more like a cup of water. Like it's there when you need it, or it's there sometimes, but you're gonna have to refill that cup. It's not like an ever flowing thing. So like the myth around constantly being inspired to write, yeah, we need to we need to talk about that a little bit more in depth.
You're listening to From Post to Publish. We're your hosts,
Jessica Jax.
And I'm Marisa Lowen. And on this episode, we explore another checkpoint on the way to publishing over 100 books in 90 days. So one of the questions that I saw the most as we were preparing for this crazy challenge journey that we're on is, do we need an outline before we start writing? And you and I, Jessica, had talked quite a bit about what all should be in this challenge, how to get people started, the research phase, the writing phase. How do you feel about outlines?
All right, so outlines I like to think as a guideline. You know that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean, I'm sorry. You know that scene in Pirates of the Caribbean where they're like, oh, they bring out the book with all of the pirate code or whatever. And they're like, they're just guidelines anyway. We don't actually have to follow them like to the T. Okay. That's how I feel about outlines. Outlines are there to provide kind of like a preliminary structure that you can go back to and you can fill in as much as you want or take away. So I understand the question as far as like, is an outline for me, or, do I have to do an outline? Okay, there's kind of two-part question there. So depending on what you're working on, you may not even need an outline. I know I didn't use an outline when I published my surreal erotica poetry ebook. And so in my opinion, an outline is really just another medium, another tool to use through the writing process to just get those first inputs of like ideas and to just have them in one place that you can go back to as much as you want.
As someone who is generally chaos running amok throughout everything in their life, I personally bristle at the thought of having an outline. That being said, it's incredibly useful for me because I tend to just start writing and creating, and I'll go off in a bazillion different tangents and then forget what the whole point of it is. So for me, an outline helps me to rein it in. And especially considering this whole challenge is writing a single short book, a snack, if you will, in 90 days. So we don't have necessarily the leeway of spending 6 to 12 months kind of going off in various trajectories and then reining it back in. So I'm wondering if an outline is really good for these kind of projects. And I know what you said about the poetry. If you're just putting stuff together, or if it doesn't really have a lot of words or a lot of different maybe characters in it, do you think that impacts the use of an outline or not?
Yeah. So as far as fiction, like an outline is basically a godsend. But for nonfiction, it could be a series of topics that you want to write about, and then just bullet points of those topics. Like an outline is going to look different depending on the type of writing that you're going to be doing for this book. And I just want to go back to what you said, the fact that we are trying to get you guys published within the 90-day mark. An outline is going to do a lot more help than harm in this case, because it's going to keep you on track and it's going to push that goal a little bit closer, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I like what you said, like you don't necessarily have to follow it. You've got the Pirates of the Caribbean on your side. They've fully endorsed it. I am all about creating the rules. So if you get to a certain point where you're like, this topic or this particular arc is absolutely boring me, or it does not make sense now, I mean, you don't have to stick to it. You have the ability to change the course.
Absolutely, 100%. And the thing about writing is that like everyone has their own process. You hear me talking a little bit or a lot of it about process. Bukowski basically surrounded himself in his own mess and wrote books. Like it looks different for everybody. You know what I mean? So an outline, like I said, is just a place to put like your ideas and your thoughts at first. Like even me, okay, take me for example. I consider myself a messy writer. So like I have like a graveyard of Google Docs where I have multiple different ones with different parts of the story that I'm putting together. However, I always go back to one. And that one is my outline, technically, quote unquote, with notes and headlines and just different plot points that I know that I want to have happen, arranged in a certain way. But then I go and I open another doc, and that's my toxic trait. I will open another doc to make it look more organized as I go. So just having that one to return back to.
Wait. Can you explain that a little bit more for me? You open up another doc to make it look more organized. What do you mean?
All right. So an outline for me is like, I will write down all of the like stuff that is going on in my head when I first have the idea. So when I first have the idea and I put that all down, I will open another doc and start on one of those ideas. If that makes a little bit more sense. I will start on one of those ideas and like lengthen it and expand on it. Like, okay, so why does this happen in this way? Or who, depending on the character, okay, what is the character's origin story? I can't put all of that in an outline. An outline is kind of like a more simplistic way of looking at the whole story. Whereas you're going to need some space to really put the rest of the story together. So I like starting on blank pages. That's my toxic trait. But a blank page for me is so like visually freeing, where it's like I could do anything with this one page right now.
So what are we doing? The opposite. I actually love having like a page break. Like I'll write a full page and I'm like, this is all crap. And then I'll just start writing better stuff on page 2 and 3. And I think it's because I got the blank page like phenomenon out of my head. Like it's almost like staring at that black blank page. I have gone so far as to go and copy some lorem ipsum dolor onto the first page so that my brain can be tricked into like, oh, we already wrote a full page.
No, this is beautiful though, because this is exactly proving my point. Every writer has their own process. Every one of you is going to have your own way of doing this. So even though I'm putting the basics out there, you don't have to use those as like me slamming a rule book down on the table and being like, you got to do this, you got to do it this way. Like, no. As someone who's a student, I really thrive on the fact that I can do things my own way. And I piss off my professors a little bit with that attitude, but it's my way. So I embrace it and I use it to the best of my ability to be more productive rather than feeling limited.
Yeah, I think both of us are going to be throughout the rest of the weeks of this challenge. We're both going to be encouraging everybody to do it their own way and to really explore the possibilities of how they write best and how they edit best and how they publish best. Because I think when we try to put ourselves too much into a formula, it can feel really restricting. And creativity is not like that. Creativity to me is like, it is science. It is testing it out. It's exploring, it's figuring it out. Like you said, everybody has their kind of their writing style. Some people are going to be doing it late at night. Some people are going to do it early morning. Some people will do it, in the afternoon. Those kind of things I hope people also share during the course of this, because I think what we're doing as an overarching, impact driven community-based project is we're looking at people sharing what works for them so that other people can try it out. Because maybe somebody has a tool or tactic that you have never heard of before, and it might work for you. And being able to I always think of ideas as a pair of pants. We pick them off the shelf, we try them on, we stretch, we go for a walk. If they absolutely do not feel comfortable, take off those pants and put them back on the shelf or return them. But if they almost feel good and they just need a little bit of tailoring, then let's do that so that it actually fits you and fits your style.
Exactly. I think we are going to be spending a whole lot more time telling people about trying to find their way through this. So if we didn't have, so I'm making ready-made materials that cover kind of like the base so that you guys can take it further for yourselves. And I want to see how far you guys stretch past the basics and the little rules that I'm placing in front of you. But yeah, as long as we have like the resources, we have the value. So a lot of people don't work the way that I do or the way that Marisa does. Some people really like to have a structure and like to, look at the logic behind certain tools and how it's going to make them more efficient. And, efficiency is one of the main things that I really want to focus on, efficiency and it being making this as entertaining as possible for you guys so that you guys are never feeling like limited or bored or like uncomfortable. And then just matching that energy throughout the community.
Yeah, we have 12 weeks to go.
Exactly.
No pressure.
We have a long way, y'all. Well, for me, it feels like, oh, we have a lot of time. And that's the procrastinator in me. But yes. For everybody else, they're like, fuck, we don't have any time. So I get it.
We're like burning out. We're like already burning out. We're like, oh my God, we're already behind, but we're not. We're right where we need to be, no matter where we are in this process. So I want to talk a little bit about, because this is going out to everybody, not just the people in the challenge. I want to talk a bit about what this whole challenge is, because the title of this podcast is From Post to Publish, publishing over 100 books in 90 days. Now it is a bit of clickbaity and I fully embrace that and admit to it. But the idea is that I put out a single Facebook post and said, hey, would anyone else be interested in writing a book in the next 90 days with me? And immediately got like 54 responses. And at that point, I was like, oh, maybe I should probably do this as like an official email opt-in because I did not want another Facebook group at all, ever. And I looked around at my tools that I had for my business for Create the Rules Catalyst and said, hey, I actually can do this in a little bit more formal way. And then reached out to Jessica and said, you want in. But let's talk about why this was important. Like, why is this whole kind of project important to you, Jessica?
This whole project is important to me because I want to prove to myself and other people that they can write, period. I mean, writing it within 90 days is awesome. Writing, period, and finding your way through writing is valuable. It's valuable and it's full of infinite possibilities. And I started with a little bit of enabling and a little bit of instigating. Okay. But for me, those are the most powerful things that I have to really make moves. Instigate a conversation with me or enable me to do something and I'm on it.
And for me, it's important to me because I've been doing a lot of research as a result of Create the Rules Catalyst about occupational loneliness. And what I've been finding are some really concerning stats about how occupational loneliness, which is basically you could be surrounded by a ton of like family, friends, even colleagues in your niche and feel like you don't have anyone to connect with, to talk about what you're doing or to really get feedback in a constructive way. And so what that happens is when we feel that occupational loneliness, it can actually be one of the major contributions of depression and suicide in business owners and entrepreneurs. And when I look at those kind of stats, I think, okay, how can we start to build community around some of the industries that are typically isolating? You know, a really interesting thing that too is that has come out of the Panorama, Panda Express, Panini, whatever you want to call it, is that, you know, a lot more people are working remotely. They're working from home. They're not necessarily coming into the office and being around other people or their peers in a connective way. They might still be having online meetings, but they aren't necessarily connecting. So part of this project for me is to see how we can bring a community of people who really only share one thing. They're writing, editing, and publishing a book. But we have fiction writers, nonfiction writers. We have people who have published before. We have people where this is the first book. We have some that are using this for their business. We have some that are just using this for funsies. We have some of this using it to like really explore their creative side and to challenge them. And I think having that central focus of only the writing, editing, and publishing a book in 90 days is going to be really interesting in how we build community, how we build connection, how we foster relationships within that community and create really powerful placemaking so that it can be maybe studied, maybe duplicated or replicated elsewhere, or to encourage and help other communities build these kind of relationships, especially when people are in isolated areas, whether that's their career or their personal life. So for me, it's a bit of a science experiment. I'll just admit that. I'm going to be observing how people do. I'm still writing my own book. There's a whole bunch of science around observing how I do this challenge. I have a personal little diary, a dear diary that I'm keeping, but it is definitely to see how we build connection. And even you and I, Jessica, I've started kind of creating some observations just about how we work together, or even when you or I bring up past traumas about working together. And I think it would be good to admit that that's happening, right? We're both kind of bringing up some past, like,
Right.
working with other people and that collaboration wound.
Absolutely. For me, I've been burned through collaborations before. I've hoped really, I've hoped for the best from collaborations in the past. This is the one where I feel like I'm putting a lot of effort into it and it's feeling natural to me. It's not feeling like I'm pressured to put in the effort. It's like Marisa is just like the best not manager ever. And she's just like, hey, yeah, do whatever you want. And I'm like, okay. So
we're peers. We're peers.
Yeah,
right? This isn't my project and then you're helping me with it. At least I don't view it that way. I view this as our project. When I start talking about it to people, I go, me and Jessica.
Yeah. And I love that. I love that I'm included fully and not just partially or not just because it would look better. You know what I mean? I feel like a lot of times or sometimes collaborations come together when people feel like they can add a higher price point to it. And that's not what this is.
Oh, that's an interesting. That's just surprised me. That surprised me that you brought that up. That's interesting. I'm naive sometimes. I'll just tell you this, but interesting. So people come together when they could do a higher, so they feel like bringing on another person adds more value.
Yeah, basically. And I could see where that might make sense with certain service-based businesses. Like, okay, here's a designer. Okay, well, what else can go or be involved with design? Okay, how about like a brand manager? Or like, hey, how about like an OBM or a marketer to like help organize the things and make sure that it's running smoothly and that it's doing what it's supposed to do. Okay. Like I understand where that idea comes from. But I think it's really important with who you're collaborating with, not what they do, like solely what they do. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I know for me, a lot of collaborations in the past, I've hoped to bring on somebody who saw themselves as a peer, but they often would like wait for me to, approve or to tell them what to do. And I think of like, if you think about like our task list, we don't have an official, we sort of have a list, but we don't have a list. We talk about outlines. We have a very rough outline of 3 parts that we're kind of working from. But when we talk about that list of tasks that we are both generating every day for this project, if we were to wait for each other to give the go ahead or the, we're more like coming in at the feedback stage, like, okay, I made this. What do you think? As opposed to that kind of like ask for permission at the beginning, I don't think it would work because we're creating so many tools, so many resources for folks at once that it wouldn't work. It would just be so slow.
Yeah, I don't know if you're into human design or not. I'm like slightly into it and I basically know like a couple of things. But as a projector, I have started and stopped so many conversations with you, Marisa, that start with, hey, what do you think about, or I'm thinking about, or like, hey, should we or should I, like permission-based questions. And I've just hit backspace on it. And I keep catching myself doing it. And I'm like, no. Like, I'm good. I need to trust that what I'm doing is the right way and the right thing. And Marisa will tell me otherwise if not, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I get a lot of flack because I'm pretty blunt. And because I literally am a strategist in my day job, I have people asking me things all the time. Like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And I absolutely hate dependability on me. Like, it's very different if they're
Right.
looking for strategy and I'm directly pouring into them. But for the most part, I'm actually really cognizant about not directing other people's business because it's their business, not my business. Right. And
Yeah.
so for
Yeah.
me, I spend half my time trying to remove my own bias and my own judgment because I might not be their perfect audience. I might not be. So any
Mhm.
input that I give in the way of an opinion or even a tactic could take them off on a completely different road than they were meant to be on. So it's interesting that you say that because I probably would just be like, if you had said, what do you think about it? I'd be like, well, what do you think about it? Because also, I'm more interested in how your personal life experience and your bias and your beliefs have come to a conclusion than I am hearing myself talk. Because I've already heard
Yeah.
all of the ideas in my head, like many
Right.
times, right?
Right.
And
No,
now
that makes sense.
yeah, and now I have you who has like a whole completely separate life experience, a whole completely set of learnings and viewpoints and beliefs. And it's so exciting for me to hear that. And then we mix them together and then we see what comes out of it. Right.
Right. We
And
see
that
what
to
comes out
me
and
is
we make
more
it
exciting.
better.
What's that?
We like evaluate that, but then we find a way to make it better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's the point of it, right? That's the point of
Yeah.
co-creation. It isn't my idea or your idea. I mean, there might be
Right.
times where it's like 100% my idea or your idea, and then bang on, like, let's go for it.
Right.
When it works, it works. But I think it's even better when we work to make it even better together.
Yeah.
And I think that's the heart of this project is how do we bring together over 150, we're almost at 160 people now together. Well, we might even, I haven't checked the numbers yet this afternoon, but
Yeah.
almost 160 people together to publish over 100 books. I'm being liberal. I mean, if we hit all 160, woohoo. But the idea that we can do this together and help people and support them and nourish is that co-creation process that I so badly crave.
Yes, absolutely. And to go back to that, I remember what I had wanted to say. Being a writer is super lonely. Being a creative in general is super lonely. So having a community around this is huge, not just for me, but I've had a lot of people contact me personally and tell me how this is what they needed. They needed a community. They needed some way to invite people in without feeling like, gross about it. And I know we talk about like salesmanship and marketing and that feeling gross, but it's a whole other thing when you're putting your own creation out there and it's just 100% vulnerability. It's like, here are my innards, go look at them. Like, that's basically what it feels like for me. Because it's all of the things that are in my head that I don't easily express or like talk about if I'm not writing it. And so I want you guys to think about, yes, the bigger picture, and how you are interacting with each other through this new space and, using these new techniques. But I also want you to sit with yourself and think about how you're feeling internally as you're going through this community. Because, like Marisa said, this is basically like a science project, and we want to know what your full experience is in an all-encompassing form.
Yeah, and that's going to be the point of this podcast. Jessica and I are going to explore each week things that we have observed, things that we have seen, provide any feedback that maybe have been given to us during the week. Because even though right now we're talking mostly to the people in the current project, this time span from now until October 2022, this podcast is going to live on afterwards. And I really hope that it inspires not just writers, not just creatives to find a community, but also community builders, community cultivators, culture makers to come and listen and kind of explore with us over the next 12 weeks this process that we're learning as we go. And we want to share it when it's fresh, because sometimes at the end we're like, what happened on week 2? I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah.
We're going to be sharing it as
exactly.
we go. The other thing I do want to say too is you talked about that loneliness. The other thing that I find is that oftentimes business owners or creatives will be like, I'm going to form a mastermind of like 5 or 6 people, and we're all going to work on this together. But the reality is that a really great mastermind has a facilitator whose sole job is to help people move through something. What can happen is when people form these independent little groups and they're all working together on their individual project, is that they don't get that masterful support of someone who is kind of watching the whole thing. So we've got the whole idea and journey mapped out in our heads of where we're going. We're able to come in and help direct that as we go. We're also writing our own book, but we are acting as facilitators of the process. So it's a little different if you're forming your own community or your own little, group of people that are doing this. Think about one person being the facilitator, or a couple people being the facilitator, or even, you might switch off, but it really does help to actually have someone who is involved in your process, and so that they can actually provide direction and really pull out the things that you might be ignoring, whether on purpose or subconsciously, about your own process and your own success in it. So that's one thing I'll just say. It's one thing to think about.
Yes, absolutely.
Cool. Anything else you want to share about our first week? How's it gone for you? What, anything that's really excited you?
The things that have been standing out to me the most is the reaction from the community themselves, the excitement. I feel the buzz. Like every time I'm on Heartbeat, just as much as I am on Facebook now. And I'm actually going through and reading through you guys' like favorite books and what you're interested in, and your comments on each other's introductions is really fantastic. Your comments answering people's questions has been really fantastic. And I'm just so happy to have a community that's engaged, because there's nothing worse than having a bunch of people and it just sounding like crickets.
Yeah. What have you noticed any obstacles, potential things that we have to look for in the next week?
Obstacles, I think definitely would be like helping people figure out what to write about. And so I did create kind of like a ready-made resource for people to kind of sit with themselves on that, because it's not up to anyone except for you on what to write about. So definitely incorporate some honesty, some transparency, not just with us, but with yourself, and finding that story in you to put out there, and using us as the facilitator of those ideas and try to help you out with that.
Yeah. Really being able to show people that they can reach out and be supported, because everyone has their own personal lived experience of how support has happened for them, or how they've asked for support and not received it. So part of this is also showing that support is available, and that they can reach out and either get, support from us as facilitators or from the community to help them keep on track.
Right. And I understand it's difficult to ask for help. I'm like the worst at asking for help. I'll like wait forever to do it. But a lot of people in here are writing nonfiction books. A lot of people in here are writing a book based off of their business genius. And that's fantastic. Just make sure that you're asking for help when you need the help, because we only have 87 days left now, counting, I think starting.
That's amazing, Jessica. Yes. Practicing asking for help when you need it, or even anticipating when you might need it, right? That's the other thing too, is knowing when you're when you're used to tapping out on projects, if you know that ahead of time, and we did ask on the intake form, when are you going to tap out? And so I have a little bit of pre-knowledge on folks, and I've got some ideas to make sure that we, keep them. But I think that is it. Practicing asking for support even before you absolutely need it, because then you're just going to keep the flow. Don't wait until you're absolutely stuck and you don't know where you're going next. Reach out. Exactly. And if you know yourself, where, like you said, you've tapped out before, reach out and get prepared for that. Get a buddy, reach out to us and see if we can help.
Right. And please understand that inspiration isn't it's not a waterfall. Inspiration is more like a cup of water. Like, it's there when you need it, or it's there sometimes, but you're going to have to refill that cup. It's not like an ever flowing thing. So like the myth around constantly being inspired to write. Yeah, we need to talk about that a little bit more in depth. I think I'm probably going to write something for that specifically, understanding that inspiration isn't your only fuel. There's many other things to take into consideration when it comes to sitting down to actually doing the things besides inspiration.
Ooh, you've got me curious. I can't wait to read this, or if we talk about it maybe next week. That's exciting. That's exciting. So for me, opportunity that I can see, what I've been enjoying this week is just seeing how many people this touched and this impacted in various ways. Some people were sparked to create a whole new package or offering, raise their prices, figure out a new direction in their business as a result of exploring what they wanted to write about. And I'm like, that's exciting. That's a ripple effect. That's a tiny ripple turning into a big wave, right? That Absolutely. I have not even anticipated. And just the fear and the excitement all mixed together, I think is so exciting for me to hear that, to hear how people are committing to themselves and committing to this book and committing to their audience because they're giving them something that they need. The obstacle that I'm looking at is, how do we build the tools that help people throughout the process, because we know everybody's going to be in different stages, because that's how writing is. Some people won't even do anything for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and then they'll sit down and write 50 pages. And then it might, so knowing that we have 160 people who are going to be coming at this, my obstacle is to create the tools that allow people to have anytime access for when they're in that moment. So I've been trying to kind of anticipate without overwhelming people. Like you said, we don't want to put 50 different tools in because it can be overwhelming at first, but I want to be cognizant that we're all kind of doing this on a different journey as we go through this.
Yes, absolutely.
And the one thing I'm excited about is to complement your discussions and your ideas about what do I write about, is I created a Oracle deck style random nonfiction writing prompt. And we can build them for the fiction writing prompts too, but I got it to work and I was testing it out before we came on here. And so I'm really excited to give that to the community that they can start playing with, just to help them along the way. For right now when they're planning, but also along the way if they need a little writing prompt boost. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, wait till you see it. You're going to be like, oh my God, neon. I totally
neon. Yes. Oh man, were we both on the same wavelength today?
I love the look. Part of it is like your website inspired. I was like, let's just do Jessica's branding and bring some of that neon excitement. But I think it's also just like, I don't know, it's exciting. It's exciting, the colors that we've chosen and the kind of the look. And I think it really just helps people have fun as opposed to kind of boring, some boring colors and whatnot. But yeah. All right. Anything else you want to talk about this week?
No, I think we're good. I think
Cool.
That's all my brain can handle for right now. Just kidding.
Excellent. Okay, well, thanks everybody for listening to our inaugural podcast from Post to Publish, publishing over 100 books in 90 days. We will have weekly episodes coming out each week. Find us on anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Please do subscribe, give us a review. Let us know what you think. If you're in the challenge or you're not in the challenge, we would love feedback, and we will look forward to hearing from you each week as you go through this personal journey with yourself.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to From Post to Publish, writing and publishing over 100 books in 90 days. Each week, we will bring you our learnings about curating a community of authors with a shared goal of publishing a book. Follow our progress on TikTok and Instagram at Create the Rules, and subscribe to our waitlist for the next free open challenge at createtherules.com/book.